So welcome. You're really stalwart to come out on a cold and dark night like this. Thank you. On the day after New Year's Eve. So you must be strong practitioners, or at least Minnesota natives at least. So is there anyone here that's here for the first time tonight? Welcome. I think that was the only hand. So there's no experience necessary. We're all beginners. I'm glad you're here. So tonight I thought we could sit for a while, and then I'm going to offer some remarks related to the new year. And then I want to make enough time to have another practice, a guided practice at the end. So our first sit may be just a little bit shorter. And we'll sit mostly in silence at the beginning and have a little bit of a stretch break and then move forward. Does that sound like a plan? Okay. All right, so if you would just settle in to whatever is a comfortable seated posture, and welcome to those on Zoom as well. We'll start with the bell. So beginning by bringing our attention to the body. The felt sense of the body sitting. The weight of the body. The contact with whatever you're sitting on. The support of the earth underneath. Resting down to the best that you are able in the felt sense of the body. And feeling the breath in the body. The breath coming into the body and the breath leaving the body. Receiving the soothing rhythm of the breath, however it is tonight. And now if you choose, opening your awareness to include whatever is arising moment to moment. Sounds in the room, sensations in the body, thoughts in the mind. Allowing and receiving whatever is predominant in your awareness moment to moment. And if and when the mind becomes lost in thought, distracted, and redirecting your attention back to a chosen anchor, the body, the breath, sound in the room, stabilizing your attention, and then if you choose, expanding once again. So we'll sit now in silence. Allowing and receiving whatever it is to be just as it is, moment to moment. This is how it is now. Can I greet it as a friend? And now taking a moment to sense into the space around your body, whether that be the space in your home where you're sitting, if you're on Zoom, or the space in this room. Sensing into the space. And the presence of those who have come here to practice tonight. The presence of those in the virtual space of Zoom, the presence of those in the meditation hall at Common Ground, this shared space of practice. Sensing perhaps the energetic support from all of these people here. The support that makes our own practice so much easier. So sensing into that support, perhaps even experiencing gratitude for the fact that we don't practice alone. And because we are marking tonight the leaving of one year and the beginning of another, you might call to mind all of those beings for whom you have gratitude in 2024. Beings who showed up to support you in some way, who taught you, who loved you, who held you accountable, whatever way that may be. Calling to mind those beings for whom you have gratitude. And taking a moment to just hold them in your heart. Thank you. And now coming back to the felt sense of this body. This body sitting and this body breathing. Breathing in and breathing out. Let's take a moment to stretch if you choose to. Whatever way feels right to you. So those of you who have sat with me before know that I like to invite people to turn to someone next to them and just say hello. We're pretty spread out in here, so I'm not sure that'll work. But, okay, we've got a little spontaneous movement over there. So, all right, so let's do it. If you feel so inclined, you can turn to somebody and just say hello in your name. Just to create a sense of community. And the people on Zoom, if you choose to, you can put a word or two in the chat just to say hello. No obligation there. can feel a little lonely in meditation halls, in my experience, so I like to do that. So Happy New Year. It's finally here, right? It feels like we've been waiting a long time for 2025. I don't know if you feel that way. And there's a whole range of emotions and thoughts that I have anyways about the future. So I'm gonna talk about a couple of practices that I'm particularly fond of, and we'll practice one of them at the end. And they're ones that help me to stay present and grounded and kind of face whatever it is we are facing. So way back in March of 2020, and the earliest days of the pandemic, you remember that? I had just come home. I was on a 1-month retreat at Spirit Rock, which got cut short right in the middle of it. And I came home feeling pretty disoriented and scared, as many of you probably felt. And I heard a talk from Matthew Brensilver on Zoom, which seems like it's still relevant for today. So if you're not familiar with Matthew Brensilver, he was a researcher at UCLA in psychopharmacology, I think, something like that. I think he's also a therapist. And he's now a member of the board of directors at Spirit Rock in Marin County. And he's a full-time Dharma teacher. And he began that talk in March of 2020 with this statement: "This is a very wobbly time for the mind, full of fear and unreliability." And I remember thinking at the time that his choice of the word wobbly was brilliant. He didn't say like we're doomed, he didn't say anything that really touched into a sense of apocalypse, but he chose to use a word that was non-judgmental, and it was almost playful. I don't know about you, but I like the word wobbly. I don't hear it very much. And although that pandemic is over, that phase of the pandemic is over, I think that the word wobbly could be a really useful way to describe how it feels now, at least how it feels to me, which is kind of out of balance, wobbly. And although we might not be able to do much to correct the imbalance in the external circumstances of our world, we can bring balance to our own minds and hearts. And we do that, of course, when we practice. Maybe you found a little bit of balance when we were sitting together. So I'd like to talk tonight about two practices that I found that really helped me to find balance amidst all of the wobbliness. I don't know if wobbliness is a word. I like it. And I like them because they've helped to lessen a sense of isolation, or a sense of a separate self that has to go it all alone, and to put my own experience in the wider context of the Dharma. So I'm going to talk first about the practice of self-compassion, which you may be familiar with, which I've taught here for several years with Jane, who's on the Zoom call. So I'll talk a little bit about why that feels like a really important practice at this point in our history. So if you haven't noticed, this is a pretty hard time to be a sensitive human being. Has anybody noticed that? Is it just me? And part of it is, I think, because of our animal nature really craves stability and reliability. We don't like things when they're imbalanced. And we're in a world that doesn't offer much stability or reliability. And of course, it's always been that way. That's what the Buddha taught, right? He taught that this is the nature of the world. But I don't know what it was like to live in other times. I just know what it's like to live now, and it feels pretty hard. That's my experience anyways. And I know that I want it to be different than it is. Does anybody here want it to be different than it is? Yeah, I do. And we also know that the craving for things to be different than they are is the root cause of suffering. Our inability or our unwillingness or whatever you want to call it, to be able to stay with what is, to rest in what is, so that then we can respond in the next moment with some wisdom and balance. And my sense of wanting things to be different than they are can show up in many different ways. So one of the ways that I notice it in myself is that I spend a lot of time talking with my friends about how outrageous things are. Anybody do that? And I never really, when I'm doing that, I never really am touching into the truth of how it is for me, something deeper. And when I do that, when I get away from all the chatter and about what's wrong with the world, what I notice is a feeling of helplessness and sometimes a sense of deep grief over the fact that the world is the way it is. So all of that venting and that chatter about how outrageous things are is a defense that I have against these deeper feelings that I don't really want to feel. But it doesn't lead to freedom, because I'm always working really hard to stay away from those feelings. And it actually just leaves me feeling more agitated and alone. This may or may not be your experience. So the alternative is to stop all the talk and to turn towards those feelings. Helplessness is like this. Grief feels like this. And that's not a very easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time. We don't like, I'll speak for myself, I don't like to feel grief. It's kind of scary. I don't like to feel helpless. So it takes a lot of time and patience, and it takes a lot of self-compassion. Because we engage our defenses for a reason, right? They provide a level of safety or a feeling of safety, and they need to be respected. So there's a Dharma teacher named Irina Weissman. Does anybody know Irina Weissman? Yeah? Great. So she knows this territory pretty well. She's a queer Dharma teacher who was born in South Africa and who had to flee with her family to Israel when she was a teenager because her parents were activists against apartheid. And they had been imprisoned at one point and were actually in danger of being killed. So she knows what it feels like to feel frightened, to feel defended. And she gave a beautiful Dharma talk on a retreat that I was at years ago called Protected the Defended Heart. So I wanted to share some of what she said, and this is what she said. We are all holding on tenaciously in our different ways. I am so moved to acknowledge why the holding is happening. Over and over again, one thing this culture doesn't do is to acknowledge the impact of what it means to live in a world that is driven by ignorance. Our experience of not feeling safe on the street, in the fluid gender expressions that we have, living with that, or the increasing violence targeted against trans, and especially trans of color, and race, or what it means to live in a country where the deepest striving is for profit and impoverishment of so many people. We carry that. And how deep and profound it is to acknowledge that, and how understandable it is that each of us has grown the defenses we have, and how we hold on to behaviors that describe those defenses, because in a world that hasn't respected us, we have gathered whatever has been available to us to survive. And in some ways, those defenses work because we are here. And the practice might be to not judge the defense or want it to not be there, but in community to honor and respect these defenses. And this is the invitation to turn towards ourselves with understanding and respect, with the faith that with caring and presence, we are learning how to be safe. We are being called to honor our history and to have faith that the offering of kindness and acceptance over time will bring about the heart and mind's opening. So that's pretty amazing. She wrote this many years ago, and she could be describing today. And I loved her naming what it's like to live in, quote, a world driven by ignorance, unquote. In, quote, a country where the deepest striving is for profit and impoverishment of so many people. Makes me want to weep. So somebody named Sally Weintraub, she's a psychologist, and she studies the effects of living in such a world. And she calls this living in a culture of uncare, a culture which recruits participation and encourages and sometimes requires us to live in ways that cause huge environmental and social damage. This is deeply painful. It causes what's called moral injury, if you know that term, where we've had to compromise some of our deepest felt beliefs, our intentions, just to survive. And this deserves our compassion as well. So I'd like to invite us to pause here for a moment and to honor what's in our hearts tonight as we contemplate the new year. So what is in your heart on this first night of 2025? As you think about the future, the near future, what comes to mind? If what you find is joy or happiness, it could be that, then notice that with gratitude. Or if what you find is anxiety or grief or other difficult emotions, you might place a hand or hands over your heart as a gesture of self-compassion. So just taking a moment to see what comes to mind as you contemplate 2025. And if what it requires is some compassion, then you might offer yourself some kind words. You could do it as an aspiration. May I meet myself with kindness. May I hold myself with care, whatever makes sense to you. Or maybe just acknowledging it, how it is with a simple ouch, this is hard. So just offering yourself compassion. And I would invite you to do this as 2025 progresses. We don't know what will happen. We never know what happens. But if there are times where you're feeling particularly vulnerable, where the pain is hard, then I invite you to offer yourself some care. It allows the heart to open, allows us to relax our defenses for just a bit. Ajahn Sucitto, if you know who he is, he's a venerated contemporary monk in this tradition. He puts it this way: let love supervise your practice. Be in loving relationship with whatever is arising in your body-mind, rather than trying to dominate or possess it. Practice not getting pulled into your sense experience or totally shutting down. You don't have to figure anything out. Your head won't tell you how to come to terms with grief or fear or whatever else arises. Give it all the time it takes. Approach it like you would a revered master. So practicing self-compassion may not change the structures of uncare that are detrimental to the planet and to its inhabitants, but it can change our relationship to ourselves. And when we cultivate a culture of care for ourselves, we are also cultivating the seeds of care for others. What we grow in our own hearts affects those around us. So I'll pause here for a moment. And I'll just open it up if there are any questions or comments that anybody wants to make about anything I've said. I notice I'm rocking back and forth. And I think that's a way of comforting myself when I talk about these things that are pretty difficult. It's another self-compassion tool, actually, rocking. It's like rocking a baby. You can rock yourself. So is there anything that anybody wants to offer or question about anything I've said? Is it making sense? If there's anybody on Zoom that wants to put something in the chat, you're welcome to. Alex, you can see that? Yeah. I'm sorry? Book. I didn't reference a book, did I? I referenced just Arena Weissman's, it was a Dharma talk. I referenced a couple of Dharma talks, yeah. The Dharma talk that Arena Weissman gave was Protecting the Defended Heart. You can probably find it on Dharma Seed, yeah. Matthew Brensilver is the name of the other teacher that I talked about. And Ajahn Sucitto was the last one. I don't know where that quote came from. I'm embarrassed to say. As a former librarian, I should be able to quote, give you the citation, but I don't know where it came from. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the second practice that I find lessens a sense of isolation and separation, and that's the elements meditation. Who's familiar with the elements meditation? Anybody? Yeah. So this is very different from the self-compassion practice, but they can both engender a more spacious connection to our experience that transcends a kind of limited sense of self. So I'm going to give a little background to the elements meditation, and then I'm going to guide a practice. So the elements meditation is offered in many places in the teachings. One of them is in the Satipatthana Sutta, or the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. It's also talked about in a sutta called the Rahulavada Sutta, or the Greater Exhortation to Rahula, in which the Buddha is giving advice to his 18-year-old son, Rahula. And in this advice, he tells him to meditate like the earth, and tells him that when he does this, pleasant and unpleasant thoughts will not occupy his mind. His mind will become like the earth, which is not repelled when things such as feces and urine, this is so much part of the suttas, are thrown onto it. He then provides Rahula with very detailed instructions about how to do this, and he goes through each of the elements that in ancient India were considered to be the kind of the way matter is constituted. So there were 5 in this case: earth element, water element, fire element, wind element, and space. Sometimes they're 4, sometimes they're 5, sometimes they're 6, but in this sutta it's 5. And he teaches Rahula to notice them both internally and externally. So to have the felt sense, actually, of these elements, water, fire, space, earth, in the body, in his own body, and then to notice them in the natural world around him. And he also told Rahula that he should constantly reflect, this is not mine, this is not myself, this is not who I am. In other words, it's a way of getting some distance from this identification we have with these bodies that we are carting around, that this is something that's actually much larger than us, that is part of the natural world. We are no different from that, and they are not a personal self. And in my experience, this can be profoundly grounding and really helps me to live in this wobbly world. So I wanted to guide that meditation as kind of a send-off for the new year, so that we can experience it firsthand and perhaps carry it with us into this dawning year. So if you're game, I'll do that. And I want to acknowledge that what I'm using, a lot of this I'm using a format that another one of my favorite teachers, Jaya Rudgard, who's a British Dharma teacher. She was a nun for a long time in this tradition. And she did one of the best elements meditations I've heard. So I am borrowing some of her language and then adapted a bit. So yeah, so we have enough time to do this, so that's good. So before I begin, any questions about the elements meditation? Okay, so find a comfortable seated posture, or you can lie down for that matter, whatever would make sense to your body right now. And let's start just by taking a few deep breaths to calm the body. So breathing down into the belly, and then slowly breathing out. Breathing down, letting the belly expand, and slowly breathing out. And now letting the breath become natural, however it is, and settling into the felt sense of the body. Noticing what's happening right now. And taking a moment again to sense the space in which you're sitting or lying down. Noticing the sounds and any movement around you, perhaps just the movement of the air. And the stillness and the quiet also. And now, if you can, inviting a sense of relaxation into this process. Your system knows how to relax. So inviting that sense of exhalation, or of sitting down in a chair, or relaxing in a warm bath. Inviting all the cells of your body to take an out breath and arrive. Letting the shoulders soften. The arms and the hands. Letting there be kindness or gentleness wherever the hands are resting. And if your hands are resting on the body, feeling what it's like to receive their reassuring touch, their warmth, just like the touch, the soothing touch of self-compassion. And softening the belly. Noticing where the legs and the feet and the whole body are in contact with the ground. The surfaces beneath supporting you. And slowly moving your attention now from the crown of the head to the lowest part of the body, where the body is resting. Moving your attention down the body. To where it makes contact with the earth underneath. And taking a moment to acknowledge the earth under and around you on your particular patch of earth. The creatures underneath the floor where you're sitting. The creatures that are there and around you and outside. And whatever grass there might be, soil, gravel, concrete. And underneath all of that, the earth. This body too is made of the earth element. Sensing this body is an outcropping of Mother Earth. All part of the same breathing organism. The trees and whatever plants are outside, they're all breathing with us. Inviting into awareness those trees that are breathing in your environment. They are breathing with you. And sensing your whole body in this space, feeling its earthiness, its solidity. Appreciating the sense of solidity in the bones, the skin, the teeth, the earth element, the hips and the bones of the spinal column and the rib cage, and the shoulder girdle, and the head, and the hair on the head if there is any. This body is filled with the earth element. Letting yourself receive and be received by the earth and the earth element. And now taking some time to acknowledge the water element around you. Maybe there's moisture in the air. Or there's water, frozen or liquid, on the roads or sidewalks outside where you're sitting. Or moisture in the soil. This is the water element permeating the earth, nourishing the plant bodies and our bodies, which are 75% water. The water element, quality of softness and of fluidity within the body. And in your own way, you might want to move your attention now down through the body, acknowledging a sense of softness and fluidity within the body wherever you find it. The digestive juices, the saliva in the mouth, the eyes, the water element in each and every cell of the body. The body made up of the water element, the same inside the body as that outside the body. And now releasing the water element and noticing the presence of the fire element in the body in terms of warmth, heat, coolness, temperature. The fire energy absorbed from the sun, either directly or stored in the tissue of the bodies and the food that we eat. So taking a moment to notice the warmth or the coolness in the body right now. The fire element is also connected to the heart quality of joy or kindness or compassion. The warmth you experience might not be physical warmth, but an attitudinal one. So allowing this field of warmth to embrace all of us letting it embrace all of you and embrace all of us. And within this field of awareness, sensing that this body is breathing, the presence of the wind or the air element. Noticing how the breath breathes you, whether you're aware of it or not. Letting yourself be breathed. The wind element. And you might sense the wind or the air element around the body. Wherever you feel air on the skin. Or you might even sense that you can almost breathe through the pores of your skin, drawing in the wind or the air element. This is the air element present in all the cells of your body and all around you. Air inside the body and air outside the body. And now sensing the space around your body. This space which has no boundary, no edge, no shape. This same space element pervades the body inside. The cells of our bodies, the molecules, the atoms, are more space than anything else. So let yourself become light and spacious. The space element. So sitting now for a few moments more. Feeling the presence of the 5 elements inside the body and outside the body. No difference, no separation. Not me, not mine, not myself. Grounded, porous, connected. So that's one of my favorites. It's hard to get too wrapped up in yourself when you're cognizant of what we're made of. So I would love to hear any reflections of your own experience of that. Questions, comments. Could you relate to that or not relate to it? What appealed or didn't? And you can put something in chat if you choose to on Zoom. It's a quiet group tonight. Anyone? Did I put you to sleep? Which is not a bad thing sometimes. Yeah. Anybody? So I offer these just as two ways that I find helpful to feel more connected to myself and to the world. Perhaps to feel a little less defended, a little more open, a little more ready to respond in whatever way feels wholesome and right to me. Which I think is what we're going to all need. So I wanted to read something that, another thing that I find very inspiring. This also, I think, was written a while ago, and I wish it's not from a book. It must have been in some group that I was in. It's a kind of a letter or a reflection from somebody named Lama Rod Owens. Does anybody know him? He's a American teacher, and he's a Lama, so he's in the Tibetan tradition, and yeah, he's a real bodhisattva. So this is his letter to all of us. Dear friends, when I talk about freedom, it doesn't mean that when we awaken, all the oppressive systems in our world disappear. No matter how awakened I get, I will still be a Black queer man in an anti-Black, anti-queer world. I'm not expecting to see an end to these systems in my lifetime, but I am expecting to see an end to the ways in which I feel dominated by the energy of these systems. I know many of us can't connect to joy, happiness, or gratitude because we're struggling with systemic oppression. Through practice, I began to understand that I was choosing certain ways of being that contributed to this. A new sense of agency awakened when I realized I could choose to do something different instead of habitually reacting. That is the foundation of meditation practice, choosing to be in a responsive relationship with the material of our minds instead of an unconscious, habitual, reactive relationship. Happiness and joy become tools of disruption because through them, we aren't adhering to the ways these systems are telling us to be, depressed, weighed down, and hopeless. I'm not choosing that anymore. Instead, if we disrupt or create space around our reactivity, we can more easily connect to joy. So I can be in this country at this moment, living in the time that we live in, which includes a pandemic, climate crisis, social division, systemic violence, and so on. I can feel all those things, but I can also connect to joy and gratitude because I choose to, and because there is still so much to be grateful for. So I'm looking at the clock here. Yeah, so I guess my wish for all of us is that we may find some of that joy and happiness that Lama Rod talks about. It's not about denying what's going on, but it's about making a choice for life and choosing those things that feed us and feed others and give us joy. And it's our practice that allows us to make those choices, because we can't do it if we're not conscious and awake. So let's dedicate our time together here tonight to the well-being of all beings. So if you want to take a moment and settle in again. Just feeling into the body. Noticing what's present now in the heart, mind, and body. And dedicating whatever goodness may have come from our being together here tonight, from our practicing together. Dedicating whatever benefit may have come from our practice, dedicating that to the well-being of all beings everywhere. Human beings who are suffering, human beings who are experiencing joy, animal beings of all types, beings seen and unseen. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering and know the causes of suffering. May all beings everywhere experience joy, the joy that comes from an awakened mind. May all beings everywhere know peace. Thank you for your kind attention. And Eric, you wanted to say a few words.
So thank you, Jean, for your teaching tonight. As most of you probably know, all programs at Common Ground are offered free of charge in the spirit of generosity or dharma. Generosity as a spiritual practice invites us to explore the effects of mindful giving and receiving, to see fear, greed, and confusion, as well as the basic goodness of a generous act. When we have a guest teacher here at Common Ground, all donations that are given that evening, 2/3 of those donations go to the guest teacher and 1/3 go to the center. The Donna bowls are out in the lobby, and we also have a square card reader. And if you need help with that, you can try to talk to me or Alex or even Tyler, and we'll try. And then a few announcements for this week. So half-day retreat with Mark Nunberg on Saturday, the 11th, from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. in person or on Zoom. Introduction to Mindfulness Meditation Workshop with Stacy McClendon, Saturday, January 11th from 1 to 5, in person or on Zoom. This Precious Human Life, Personal Reflections on Death and Dying, Guest Dharma Talk with Meg Brandeland, Friday, January 17th from 7 to 9. Befriending Death Workshop with Meg Brandeland and Mark Nunberg, Saturday, January 18th from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And Practical Aspects of Death and Dying for Students on the Buddhist Path with Meg Brandeland, Sunday, January 19th from 2 to 3, in person or on Zoom. Register for retreats, courses, and workshops at commongroundmeditation.org on the calendar. Shelly is going to be on retreat for at least a couple more weeks, or she's teaching on retreat for a couple more weeks. So we'll be having guest teachers on for the next couple of weeks at least. And then Be Queer Now, which is usually on the first Wednesday of the month, has been rescheduled this month for next Wednesday. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Thanks again. Happy New Year. Keep the faith. And if you've got any comments or questions for me and you were too shy to say it in public, you're welcome to come out now. Thanks for coming. Yeah. And goodbye, Zoomers.